Emma worked the night shift at Miller's Diner every evening. The small restaurant sat on the edge of town, where truckers and late-night travelers stopped for a hot meal. She had been doing this job for 2 years now, saving every tip she earned. Her dream was to go to nursing college and make a better life for herself and younger brother Tom. Tom was only 16 and still in high school. After their parents died in a car accident, Emma became responsible for everything. She paid the rent, bought groceries, and made sure Tom had clean clothes for school. It was hard work. But Emma never complained. She knew that one day things would get better. On this cold November night, rain hit the windows hard. Emma moved between the tables with a damp cloth, cleaning each one carefully. Her uniform was old and had been washed so many times that the blue color had faded to light gray. Her shoes had holes in them that she covered with gray tape, but they still kept her feet dry enough to work. The diner was quiet tonight. Only a few customers sat at the counter, drinking coffee and reading newspapers. Emma liked the peaceful moments. They gave her time to think about her future and the classes she would take when she finally saved enough money for college. At exactly 9 o'clock. The sound of motorcycle engines filled the parking lot. Emma looked through the window and saw 5 big motorcycles. The riders turned off their engines and walked toward the door. Their leather jackets were shiny and new, and their boots made loud sounds on the wet pavement. The first man through the door was tall and broad. His name was Jack, though Emma did not know this yet. He wore a black leather jacket that looked expensive, and his boots clicked loudly on the tile floor as he walked. Behind him came 4 other men, all dressed similarly and talking loudly. Among themselves, Emma put on her best smile and walked over to greet them. Customer service was important at Miller's Diner, and her boss always reminded her to be friendly to everyone who came in. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said warmly. "Welcome to Miller's Diner. Would you like to sit anywhere special?" Jack looked round the restaurant and pointed to a large table near the window. "That one will do," he said without looking at Emma. Directly. Emma led them to the table and handed out menus. "What can I get you to drink tonight?" she asked, pulling out her small notepad and pen. Jack leaned back in his chair and looked Emma up and down slowly. His eyes took in her faded uniform, her taped shoes, and her tired face. A smirk appeared on his lips. "Coffee," he said. "Black coffee. And make sure it's hot this time. Not like the cold garbage most places try to serve." "Of course, sir," Emma replied. "I'll bring that right out for you." She went to the kitchen and poured fresh coffee from the pot that had just finished brewing. The coffee was hot and smelled good. Emma carefully carried the pot and 5 cups back to the table on a tray. Her hands were tired from working all day. She had been on her feet since 6 in the morning, doing laundry and cleaning at home before coming to work at 3 in the afternoon. As she reached across the table to pour Jack's coffee, her hands shook slightly. A few drops of the hot coffee splashed out of the cup and landed on the sleeve of Jack's leather jacket. The dark liquid stood out against the black leather like tiny mirrors. Time seemed to stop. Emma's heart began to beat faster as she realized what had happened. Jack stared down at his jacket, and then his face turned red with anger. "Are you serious right now?" Jack shouted, jumping up from his chair so quickly that it scraped loudly across the floor. "Look what you've done to my jacket." The entire diner became silent. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Forks stopped moving toward mouths. Every person in the restaurant turned to look at their table. Emma felt her face become hot with embarrassment. "This jacket cost more money than you probably make in a whole month." Jack continued yelling. "Do you have any idea how much this cost me?" Emma's voice came out as barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry. Sir, please let me clean that up for you right away. She reached for the clean towel she always kept in her apron pocket. But Jack pulled his arm away from her. "Sorry doesn't fix my jacket," he said even louder. "Where do diners like this find people like you? You can't even pour a simple cup of coffee without making a complete mess." The four men sitting with Jack began to laugh. Their laughter was mean and cold, and it made them feel even smaller. She could feel the eyes of every customer in the restaurant watching her as she knelt down to clean up the coffee that had spilled on the table and floor. Jack did not stop there. As Emma cleaned, he continued to make cruel comments about her appearance. He pointed out her old uniform, her taped shoes, and how tired she looked. His friends laughed at every mean thing he said, encouraging him to continue. The other customers in the diner watched this scene, but nobody said anything to help Emma. They looked uncomfortable, but they stayed silent and continued eating their meals. Emma needed this job more than anything. She had rent to pay next week, and Tom needed new school supplies. She could not afford to lose her job by fighting back or being rude to customers, no matter how badly they treated her. So she swallowed her pride, apologized once more, and continued to serve them with tears forming in her eyes. After the coffee incident, Jack did not calm down. Instead, he seemed to enjoy making Emma feel bad. For the next hour, he treated her like she was not a real person. He would snap his fingers loudly whenever he wanted something, the way someone might call a dog. Emma tried her best to give good service. She brought Jack a fresh cup of coffee, making sure it was very hot this time. But when she set it down in front of him, he took one sip and made a disgusted face. "This is too hot," he complained loudly. "I asked for coffee, not boiling water. How am I supposed to drink this?" Emma apologized and took the cup back to the kitchen. She added some cold coffee to cool it down and returned to the table. Jack tasted it again and shook his head with annoyance. "Now it's too cold," he said. "Can't you get anything right? This is basic stuff. Any waitress should know how to serve coffee." His four friends laughed every time Jack said something mean. They seemed to think it was the funniest thing they had ever seen. Emma felt her face burning with shame, but she smiled and went to get another cup of coffee. Jack was not finished making demands. He picked up the menu and threw it down on the table. "Bring me this menu again," he ordered, "and this time try to hold it steady when you give it to me." Emma's hands were shaking now. She was tired, embarrassed, and upset. When she picked up the menu and tried to hand it to Jack, her hands trembled even more. Jack noticed this and smiled in a mean way. "Look at that," he said to his friends. "She can't even hold a menu without shaking. How does someone like this get a job serving people?" The other customers in the diner could hear everything Jack was saying. Some of them looked uncomfortable and whispered to each other, but nobody stood up to help Emma or tell Jack to stop being cruel. When Jack finally decided to order food, Emma wrote down his order carefully and took it to the kitchen. The cook at Miller's diner was an older man named Bill. He had been working there for 20 years and had seen many different customers come and go. Bill was always kind to Emma and treated her like his own daughter. Emma gave Bill the food order, and he cooked everything exactly as Jack had requested. The food looked perfect and smelled delicious. Emma carried the plate back to the table, hoping that Jack would finally be satisfied. But Jack looked at the food and immediately started complaining. "This meat is overcooked," he said, "even though it looked perfectly fine. Take it back and tell them to do it right this time." Emma apologized and took the plate back to Bill. Bill looked at the food and shook his head. "There's nothing wrong with this," he said quietly. "That man is just trying to make trouble." Bill cooked a new meal, and Emma brought it back to Jack again. Jack claimed it was not right. The vegetables are undercooked now. He said, "How hard is it to make a simple dinner?" Emma had to go back to the kitchen a third time. Bill could see that she was getting very upset. Her eyes were red, and her hands were shaking worse than before. "Don't let him get to you, dear," Bill whispered to her. "Some people are just mean because they're unhappy inside their own hearts. This is not about you. This is about him having problems." Bill's kind words helped Emma feel a little better. But she still had to go back to Jack's table this time. Jack ate the food without complaining, but he made sure to criticize everything else Emma did. When Jack finished eating, Emma brought him the check for his meal. Jack looked at the bill and made sure everyone in the restaurant could hear what. He said next, "Well, I won't be leaving a tip tonight," he announced loudly. "Bad service doesn't deserve good money. Maybe, if she learns how to do her job properly, she might earn some tips from the next customers." Emma felt like crying, but she held back her tears. The tip money was important to her. Every dollar helped her save for college and pay for things Tom needed at home. Daughters Jack and his friends got ready to leave. Jack did something that showed just how mean he really was. He reached for his water glass, which was still full, and deliberately knocked it over with his hand. The water spread quickly across the table and began dripping onto the floor. "Oops," Jack said with a fake smile that did not reach his eyes. "Looks like you have another mess to clean up. Better get to it." Emma watched as Jack and his friends walked toward the door. Laughing loudly, she knelt down on the floor with her cleaning towel, soaking up the water while they left the restaurant. Through the window, she could see Jack talking to his friends in the parking lot. Even though she could not hear everything clearly, she caught some of his words that cut deep into her heart. "Some people are just born to be nothing," Jack was saying. "That girl will never amount to anything in her whole life. She'll probably be cleaning up messes for other people forever." Those words hurt Emma more than anything else Jack had done that night. They made her feel small and worthless. But as she finished cleaning the water and counted her tips for the night, something changed inside her heart. She made a promise to herself right there in that empty diner. She would never let anyone make her feel worthless again. Jack had no idea that Emma was hiding something important about herself 3 years ago, before her parents died in a terrible car accident. Emma had been one of the best martial arts fighters in the entire county. She had won many championships and trophies. Her dream back then was to become a professional fighter and compete all around the country. But when her parents died, everything changed. Emma had to give up her fighting career to take care of her younger brother Tom. She needed to work full-time to pay for rent, food, and all the things Tom needed for school. There was no time left for training or competing in tournaments. The old gym where Emma used to train was called Dragon Fitness. It was located in the basement of an old building downtown. The owner was a kind man named George who had taught martial arts for over 30 years. He had watched Emma grow from a shy little girl into a powerful fighter. When Emma stopped coming to the gym after her parents died, George understood why. He knew she had to work to support herself and her brother, but he never cancelled her membership. He kept hoping that someday she would come back. On the Saturday morning after the terrible night at the diner, Emma woke up feeling different. Jack's cruel words were still in her head, but instead of making her feel sad, they made her feel angry. She decided to visit the gym for the first time in months. When Emma walked through the door of Dragon Fitness, George looked up from the front desk with surprise and happiness. His face broke into a big smile. "Emma," he said, standing up to give her a hug. It's been so many months since I've seen you here. How are things going in your life?" Emma sat down in the chair next to George's desk. She told him everything about what happened at the diner. She explained how Jack had embarrassed her in front of everyone and said she would never amount to anything. George listened carefully to every word, nodding his head with understanding. "That man was wrong about you," George said when Emma finished her story. "You are one of the strongest people I have ever known. Not just physically strong, but strong in your heart and mind." George walked over to a bulletin board on the wall and pointed to a colorful poster. "There's a big tournament happening next weekend," he said. "Fighters from all over the state will be there. The prize money for winning is $5,000. Emma's eyes grew wide when she heard this. $5,000 was exactly what she needed for her first year of nursing school. It was more money than she could save from tips in many months of working at the diner. "But George," Emma said quietly, "I haven't fought competitively in 3 years. I don't know if I still have the skills." George smiled and walked over to the training area. "Your body remembers everything you learned," he said. "Fighting is like riding a bicycle. Once you know how to do it, you never really forget." That afternoon, Emma put on her old training clothes and stepped onto the mat for the first time in years at first. Her movements felt slow and awkward, but after a few minutes, something amazing happened. Her body began to remember all the techniques she had learned. For the next week, Emma trained every morning before going to work at the diner. She woke up at 5 o'clock and practiced for 2 hours before her shift started. George helped her remember combinations of punches and kicks. He taught her new defensive moves that had been developed since she stopped training. Each day, Emma felt stronger and more confident. Her speed came back quickly. Her reflexes became sharp again. But most importantly, the strong, confident feeling she used to have was returning to her heart. On the morning of the tournament, Emma felt nervous but excited. She had not competed in front of a crowd for 3 years. When she arrived at the sports center where the tournament was being held, she saw hundreds of people in the audience. Emma's first opponent was a woman who looked very strong and experienced. But when the match began, Emma moved with grace and power that surprised everyone watching. She won her first fight easily. As the day continued, Emma defeated opponent after opponent. Each victory made her feel more like her old self. The crowd began to notice this unknown fighter who was beating everyone she faced. During the lunch break, a reporter from the local newspaper approached Emma. The reporter had heard that she worked as a waitress at Miller's Diner and wanted to know more about her story. "This is incredible," the reporter said. "You work at a diner, but you fight like a professional athlete. How is this possible?" Emma told the reporter about her past as a champion fighter and how she had given up competition to take care of her family. She explained that she was fighting in this tournament to earn money for nursing school. By the end of the day, Emma had won her entire division. When the reporter interviewed her after receiving the winner's trophy, Emma said something that would be remembered by everyone who heard it. "I fight for everyone who's ever been told they're not good enough," Emma said, holding up her trophy. "We all have strength inside us. Sometimes we just need to remember how to use it." The story about Emma appeared in the newspaper the next day. Soon, everyone in town knew about the waitress at Miller's Diner who was also a champion fighter. 3 weeks passed after Emma's tournament victory. Life at Miller's Diner had changed completely for her. Every day, people came in not just for food, but to meet the famous waitress who had won the fighting championship. Children asked for her autograph, and adults told her how proud they were of her accomplishments. On a Thursday evening, the familiar sound of motorcycle engines filled the parking lot once again. Emma looked through the window and saw the same 5 motorcycles. From before, Jack and his friends were back. Emma felt her heart beat a little faster, but this time it was not from fear. She was a different person now. The scared, embarrassed girl from 3 weeks ago was gone. In her place stood a confident young woman who knew her own worth. When Jack walked through the door, he expected to find the same trembling waitress he had humiliated before. He planned to have some fun with her again. Maybe make her spill something else or cry in front of the other customers. But the woman who greeted him was completely different from the one in his memory. Emma stood tall with her shoulders back and her head held high. She walked toward their table with smooth, confident steps. There was something about the way she moved that reminded Jack of a dancer or an athlete. Jack looked round the diner and noticed something new. The walls were covered with newspaper clippings and photographs. The headlines talked about a local waitress who had won a martial arts championship. In the photos, a young woman held up a shiny gold trophy with a big smile on her face. Jack looked more closely at the photographs, and his mouth fell open. The champion fighter in the pictures was Emma, the same waitress he had treated so badly 3 weeks before. Other customers in the diner noticed Jack and his friends, and they began whispering to each other. Everyone in town knew the story of what had happened that night. They knew how Jack had been cruel to Emma, and they knew how she had responded by becoming a champion. Jack sat down at the same table by the window where he had sat before, but this time the atmosphere in the restaurant felt completely different. Instead of silence and uncomfortable stares, there was a feeling of anticipation in the air. A family at a nearby table asked Emma to sign their napkins. "You're our hero," the mother told Emma. "Our daughter wants to start martial arts classes because of you." Emma smiled warmly and signed the napkins. Then she turned to face Jack's table. Instead of rushing over nervously like she had done before, she took her time. She finished talking with the family, refilled coffee for other customers, and then calmly walked over to where Jack was sitting. Jack tried to use the same tactics that had worked before. He snapped his fingers loudly to get Emma's attention, expecting her to jump and hurry over to serve him. But Emma did not hurry. She finished what she was doing and then walked over to his table at her own pace. When she reached the table, she looked Jack directly in the eyes without looking away. "Good evening, gentlemen," Emma said in a clear, strong voice. "What can I get for you tonight?" Jack stared at Emma's face, trying to understand what had changed about her. Her eyes were confident and calm. There was no fear in her expression, no nervousness in her voice. She stood straight and tall, like someone who knew exactly who she was and what she was capable of doing. "I'll have coffee," Jack said quietly. His voice was much softer than it had been 3 weeks ago. He could not quite understand why, but something about Emma made him feel like he should speak more politely. Emma nodded and went to get the coffee. Her hands were perfectly steady as she poured it. There was no shaking, no nervousness, no chance of spilling anything. She set the cup down in front of Jack with smooth, controlled movements. Jack tried to find something to complain about, the way he had done before. "This coffee seems a little weak," he said. But his voice lacked the cruel edge it had carried. 3 weeks ago. Emma simply smiled at him. "I remember you," she said calmly. "You were here about 3 weeks ago. You sat at this same table." The way Emma said these words made Jack feel uncomfortable. She was not angry or upset. She was just stating a fact. But somehow, those simple words carried a lot of weight. Other customers in the diner had stopped eating and were watching this conversation with great interest. They all knew what Jack had done to Emma before, and they were curious to see how he would behave now that he knew who she really was. Jack looked round the restaurant and saw all the eyes watching him. He realized that everyone in this small town now knew his story too. They knew he was the man who had been cruel to their local hero. They knew what kind of person he had shown himself to be that night, for the first time in his adult life. Jack felt truly ashamed of his own behavior. He understood that his actions had consequences, and that people would remember how he had treated someone who did not deserve his cruelty. The confident woman standing next to his table was living proof that he had been completely wrong about her. When Emma's shift ended at 10 o'clock that night, she walked out of Miller's diner feeling tired but satisfied. The evening had gone well, and she had served many customers who treated her with kindness and respect. As she stepped into the cool night air, she was surprised to see someone waiting by the motorcycle parked near her car. It was Jack. He stood alone in the parking lot, his hands in his pockets, looking nervous and uncomfortable. His friends had already left, and he appeared to be waiting specifically for Emma to come outside. Emma stopped walking and looked at him carefully. She was not afraid, but she was curious about why he was waiting for her. Jack took a few steps toward her, but he kept a respectful distance between them. "Emma," Jack said, and his voice was shaking slightly, "I need to talk to you. I need to apologize for what I did." Emma stood still and listened. She could see that something had changed in Jack's eyes. The cruel, mocking look from 3 weeks ago was gone. Instead, she saw something that looked like shame and regret. "I was going through a really hard time that night," Jack continued, his words coming out slowly and carefully. "I had just lost my job at the factory where I worked for 8 years. They said they were cutting costs and didn't need me anymore. I was angry at everyone and everything." Emma listened without saying anything. She could hear that Jack was being honest with her now. "But that doesn't excuse how I treated you," Jack said, looking down at the ground. "You were just trying to do your job, and you didn't deserve any of the cruel things I said or did. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Jack looked up at Emma's face. "I've been thinking about what you said in that newspaper interview," he went on. "You said that everyone has strength inside them, and that we just need to remember how to use it. You were right about that." Emma nodded but still did not speak. She wanted to hear everything Jack had to say. "I realized that I was weak that night," Jack admitted. "I took my anger and frustration out on you because I thought you couldn't fight back. I thought you were powerless, so I used you to make myself feel better. That was cowardly and wrong." Emma finally spoke, and her voice was gentle but firm. "Everyone deserves to be treated with respect," she said. "It doesn't matter what job they have or how much money they make or what they look like. Everyone has value as a human being." Jack nodded his head. "You're absolutely right," he said. "I know that now. Can you ever forgive me for how I acted?" Emma thought about this question for a moment. She remembered how hurt and embarrassed she had felt that night 3 weeks ago. She remembered crying in the bathroom after Jack and his friends left. But she also remembered what her mother had taught her before she died. "Yes, I can forgive you," Emma said quietly. "But more importantly than my forgiveness, you need to forgive yourself and promise to do better in the future." Jack felt relief wash over him when he heard Emma's words. "Thank you," he said. "I promise I will do better. I want to be the kind of person who builds others up instead of tearing them down." Emma's kindness and grace inspired Jack to make real changes in his life. The next week, he started volunteering at the local community center. He began teaching young people about respect, kindness, and second chances. He shared his own story about how his anger had led him to hurt someone who didn't deserve it. Emma used the $5,000 she had won at the tournament to start nursing school. She continued working part-time at Miller's Diner to pay for her other expenses. But now she only worked 3 nights a week instead of every night. The next years passed quickly. Emma studied hard in all her classes and received excellent grades. She learned about taking care of sick people, giving medicine, and helping families through difficult times. Her teachers were impressed with her dedication and kindness. On the day Emma graduated from nursing school, she felt proud and excited. She had worked so hard to reach this goal. And now her dream was finally coming true. Before starting her new job at the county hospital, Emma wanted to visit Miller's Diner one more time. When she walked through the door wearing her crisp white nursing uniform, everyone in the restaurant cheered and clapped. Bill, the cook who had been so kind to her, came out of the kitchen with tears in his eyes. "I'm so proud of you, Emma," Bill said, giving her a big hug. "You never gave up on your dreams." Even when things were hard, Emma looked round the diner, where she had worked for so long. The newspaper articles about her tournament victory were still hanging on the wall. But now they were joined by a new article about her graduation from nursing school. Emma had learned something important during these past 2 years. Her worth as a person was never determined by what job she had or what clothes she wore. Her value came from her character, her determination, and her willingness to treat others with kindness even when they didn't treat her the same way. She was ready to start helping people as a nurse, knowing that every person she would care for deserved respect and compassion.